Let's jump back to 1985 and extra points if you know which movie of that time makes this clock famous. A year after the release of the military fast attack vehicle, Tamiya brought out the Wild One, giving us a civilian sand dune buggy with better suspension, different wheels together with a Lexan body and driver figure. It's Tamiya's 50th kit release, and here is my original. I consider it to be one of the best looking buggies Tamiya ever made. 27 years later in 2012, we got a re-release, and although the box kit didn't come with blister packaging like the original did, for those of us who build these kits, it didn't matter. Despite its age, my original is in great condition. The white wheels still look good and the tyres haven't cracked, but I put this down to how I stored it. It was kept in a plastic box without much daylight getting to it, or even fresh air for that matter. After getting this out of storage a few years ago, I repainted the driver figure with matte white paint, and I'd still like to go back and finish off the suit by adding some shade to the folds for texture. Originally, it was painted on the inside of the Lexan, but when I redid it, I painted it on the outside, and it was seeing this buggy again which triggered my return back to the hobby. On the original, there is no hole to run the battery cables out the side of the chassis, and it looks much better for it. This is the only thing I didn't like about the re-release when I first saw it, but back in 85, batteries were smaller, with lower capacities, and would fit in the tray easily. You would only get maybe 5 to 7 minutes out of a 1200 mAh NiCad battery, and a bit more if you manage to get your hands on a Tamiya racing pack. These days, we are fortunate enough to have much higher capacity batteries, but they have a larger footprint, so putting them inside these vintage buggies can sometimes be a challenge. I can't fit my 4500 mAh NIM battery in unless I run the cables outside the chassis. It makes me appreciate that Tamiya have made it easier for us, and if you run the cables close to the chassis like Matteo has done here, it still looks pretty tidy, despite it lifting the body shell a bit. Personally, I would still prefer to have it like it was in the 80s without the exposed battery wires if possible. I can get a 3500 mAh battery in okay, but in my experience I'd rather have something at 4000 mAh plus to get the drive time that I want before the battery starts to sag. So I had a chat with Pete Wiley. As I recall, he put a LiPo shorty pack in his fast attack vehicle, but from his video it wasn't clear which one he used, and being a LiPo novice, I needed some guidance. I think he had been on the sauce a bit too much.
He used to do homebrew quite a bit.
After he finished harping on about making homebrew, he finally told me which battery he used, and it was this one. Pete did have to shave away corners of the battery tray in order to get it to fit, but he seems to have had plenty of space for cable management by shoving it through the chassis under the driver figure. Added bonus, the battery is 4200 mAh, so that'd give plenty of drive time too. So I may end up going LiPo, which will be a first for me, but I have found another way to keep it clean, and if it works, I'll show you in the next video, as I'm currently building a fast attack vehicle, which of course shares the same chassis. The Wild One is my favourite RC buggy of all time, and there's a story to this, as there will be for your favourite RC, so feel free to share that in the comments. But for now, I'm going to tell you mine. Flashback to the mid-80s, and like most kids, I wanted to get a radio-controlled car, especially after being amazed by this one my friend Simon had back in 1984. Slow as it was, the winch blew my child's mind, and with its looks and realism, he hooked up the winch to pull it up a hill, which I thought was amazing. And if you want to see it in action, check the description for some running footage I found. Time went on, and for Christmas, my parents bought me one of these. Notice the feature on the handset. It slid over to the right and up to activate the turbo, which reminded me of changing up gears on real cars. I liked it, but I soon realised it had to be in turbo mode all the time for it to be anywhere near the fun I wanted to have. Anything less was not that impressive, so the dream of matching other cars in speed and then zooming out in front by using a turbo was pure fantasy. And everything was soon put into perspective when I took it to my mate Josh and he brought out the Tamiya Wild One. Back then we didn't have a way of making videos or would have even thought about it, but this is his Wild One when I filmed it back in 2008, which you can watch as I tell you the rest. We drove on the country lane outside the front of his house, and the difference between the two was night and day. The Wild One was in a totally different league, not only in performance but also looks. It was bigger, looked more real, faster and handled better. But I will say the jet hopper was robust and handled a rollover like a champ, having that spare wheel on the top to protect it. This childhood memory has always stuck with me, and it's the reason I had to have a Wild One in my adulthood. So I never had this when it was first released, and it wasn't until about 2006 when I picked up this one. But regardless, it was before any re-releases emerged. I did drive this, but I've never taken it on any savage terrain, as it's always been my pride and joy. It does have a couple of battle scars, and the obvious one being the spot lamp that I damaged in a crash. The other is the sidearm of the body, which cracked at the same time of impact. After installing a Technigold motor, I couldn't wait to try it, and I stupidly decided to drive it on a small patio area and then crashed into the leg of a metal fire pit. It now has some tape holding it together on the inside of the body, and I managed to get hold of a sticker to tidy up the spot lamp. Before I put the buggy in storage, I actually bought a new shell and decals to rectify my mistake, but after leaving the hobby for many years, I never got round to it, and now I think I'll leave it as is, other than tidying up the spot lamps, because that is a bit of an eyesore. Let's take a look at this vintage body set. It's like opening a time capsule, and what's included is impressive. Not only do you get the full body set, you get the plastic parts for the driver and also the hardware required to clip the shell in place to the roll cage. Also included are a set of decals together with instructions, which seem to absorb the colour of the box. It would be great if we could still get body sets like this. What a nice slice of history. I don't feel I could ever use this now as I've left it so long, and anyway, I do have the re-release to build. I guess this will be something I just keep new in box. I mentioned earlier that I installed the suggested Tamiya hop-up motor, which was the Technigold, and I still have the original box it came in with a price sticker on it from Model Sport. If only you could still get these at this price. I often look at these on eBay, but the prices are crazy these days. I even keep an eye out for the MFA RX-15, which was a replica of the Technigold, but these are hard to get hold of as they were a limited run in 2014. In the box you got a tool bag for brush maintenance, and mine is still sealed. And although the glue has gone off to hold the box together, it's still in great condition. Let's take a look under the shell. There's a few body clips to release. I installed a Futaba ESC, the MC230CR, which supports 20 to 27 turn motors. I'd like to see more ESCs in retro neon colours. I'm pretty sure this was released around 2005 and it fits in there easily with its small profile. The servo is pretty standard for its time, as is the ACOM's receiver. I still have a stick transmitter somewhere I could use, but I'd need to see if I've got the matching crystal before being able to give this a gentle run. The crazy thing is, I never had the money to get a Wild One when it was first released, and neither would my parents dump up the money for one. I find myself in a similar situation. I would love one of these, a full-sized Wild One, but again, I don't have the money for this, so maybe, just maybe, in another 20 to 30 years, I will be seen as a senior citizen bombing around the dirt tracks in one of these.